It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this insightful webinar session held at Indian Institute of Plantation Management, Bengaluru, on sustainable marketing of tea, aligning sourcing with branding strategy. As the global demand for ethically sourced and environmentally friendly products grows, it has become crucial for business in tea industry to integrate sustainable practices, not just in sourcing, but also in how they position their brands. Therefore, it is great honor to welcome our esteemed dignitaries to this webinar session. We are privileged to have with us our esteemed keynote speaker, Dr. Mano, currently serving as a professor in the Department of Marketing and Director in charge of Indian Institute of Plantation Management, Bengaluru. With 30 plus years of experience in postgraduate teaching with a blend of research, training, and administration, he has specialized in the areas of research in marketing and branding. Dr. Mano, an enthusiastic planter himself, has widely traveled across northeastern regions for training and research-related activities. I now invite Dr. Mano to share his insights on sustainable marketing of tea, aligning sourcing with branding strategy. We look forward to your valuable perspectives and expert guidance. We welcome you, sir.
Good evening to all of you. And today, I take this as a great opportunity, and also it's a privilege for our Indian Institute of Plantation Management to reach to you on some of the emerging challenges, especially the tea sector is facing. With that kind of a background, how do you make this tea sector more sustainable, and to be very specific, through the sustainable marketing practices? So if you look at the current scenario, and also the kind of challenges that the sector is facing, I no doubt that there are a lot of opportunities that emerges out of these challenges. One such, as you all know, being the stakeholders in this industry for such a long period of time, in the recent past there is an emergence of small tea growers. In fact, today, if you look at the contribution made by the small tea growers, has gone beyond even 50%. Secondly, if you look at the challenge is the decline in the production. So the decline in production, multiple reasons are behind that. One, if you look at the pest attack or even the tea mosquito bug, which has become a big menace today, then climate change and resistance against insecticide, then also most importantly, the large planters not finding this as profitable and migrating to some other crops or leaving or abandoned tea estates. The third reason related to the issue or the challenges related to the supply side is about the labor issues. If you look at the labor issues today, one, you don't get sufficient number. Two, you don't get labor on time. Sector like tea, for doing the routine cultural practices and also harvesting, if you don't get timely labor, it will have an impact on the quality of the produce. So labor issue continue to be there. And finally, if you find globally, the emerging countries like other Southeast Asian countries where the production of tea is increasing, and again, in fact, their cost of production is lesser than what the cost of production in India. All these issues are related to the supply side. If you look at the second major challenge, which is related to what we call it as the demand side. The demand side, one important aspect is the shift in the demography and the consumption pattern. The population is growing, and the age pattern is growing, and also, age group, and also what you call it as the consumption pattern is also changing. The way in which tea is being consumed, do we have, as a consumer, have an appreciation for having a pure tea, or we add tea with anything and everything else, as it is done in Western countries? The next one, what we call it as increasing customer awareness and the interest to know about the manner in which tea is being produced, processed, marketed, and given to the customer. And today the technology is helping very much for a customer to know about the manner in which the tea is being produced and where it is being originated. Then the next one is changing trade regulations, bilateral agreements, And you would have come across with a lot of what you call it as news these days talking about agreements, trade agreement with European countries or trade agreement with other ASEAN countries, right? So this shift is putting a lot of challenges from the supply side. Then finally, stringent norms for export. There is no doubt, you can export specialty tea from India to the emerging or the rich market or affluent market, but then this affluent market is becoming more and more stringent in terms of their export norms. If you look at even the today's news, European Union has come out with what we call it as, they are reducing the MRL. So their expectations are very high. But what these issues or the challenges are, giving a message to the tea stakeholders. And how do you make this tea marketing as more sustainable, right? So if you look at the basic concept of the sustainable marketing, it talks about addressing the future needs of customer and then addressing the future needs of the business. So therefore, I don't really find a major threat from these challenges in the tea sector, but you as a businessman or as a stakeholder, you need to find an opportunity that are coming out with every challenge that you're facing, right? So to make this marketing as more sustainable. So therefore, there need to be a very collective kind of a responsibility among all the stakeholders. If you look at the stakeholders, right from the production, the estate owners, then again the way in which it is being processed, maybe the way in which the tasting and the blending is done, then the packing is done, and how do you offer to the customer to consume it. So therefore, all the stakeholders across the value chain are expected to take up the responsibility to ensure that this tea marketing is becoming more sustainable. And let me look into few important maybe the 5 key areas that we as a stakeholder, we need to look into to make this tea marketing as more sustainable. Number 1, you need to look at more of a customer-centric production and marketing. Number 2, you need to come out with an ethical sourcing, especially when you find that the emergence of small tea grower and the small tea growers share is much more. So the people who are involved in sourcing fresh leaf from the garden, they need to come out with an ethical practice. These are some of the gray areas where need an improvement we need to address to. The third important one is, no doubt, it is a product innovation and the development. That product innovation and the development should take place at the farm level itself, or I would say that every farmer need to show interest on non-farm activity, right? Think beyond the production. The fourth important point is integrating the small tea grower into the market. So never do a business in isolation. Never do a marketing in isolation by ignoring the grower. So any marketing need to be sustainable. The producer should be a part of it. And finally, what we talk about is that green marketing, right? How do you best make use of the green marketing? Because the future is going to be that, and it should be taking care of what you call as environment friendly and meeting the requirement of the what you call as mitigate the climate changes issues. So on these 5 issues, let me spend some time quickly to get an understanding about how best you can make this tea marketing as more sustainable. So the first one, as I mentioned, this is about customer-centric production and marketing. So it is not that you keep producing what that you can produce, but you also need to look at what the customer require or what the buyer. Maybe for you the customer is immediate, maybe a bottle factory, and for him maybe the processing, and maybe in the later part there's somebody who's doing the blending and made tea, marketing it. So therefore, what the market is looking for, maybe let it be like the kind of the clone that you do, or the kind of pest management, what are the chemicals that you use, or your harvesting practices, your plucking practices, your transportation practices. Every activity that you do, you need to ask a question to yourself, how this is adding value to the customer. So every activity should revolve around the customer's requirement. Or in another way, whatever that are the efforts that are being taken by you, you ask a question to yourself, how your effort is adding value to your customer. So it should be customer centric. To point out few issues, like, the T-board has come up with earlier in the plant protection code. You need to have an understanding about the plant protection code. What are the guidelines? When I travel across the Northeast, especially in Assam, what I find is that many of the small tea growers, they're not really aware of that. Of course, to the large factory corporate garden, it's all happening diligently. So everyone in the value chain need to be very much aware of that. Very similarly to that guidelines for FSSAI, right? Now, you also need to understand where your product is going. See, if you look at the market structure, the market demography, such a diverse market, heterogeneous market, and whether it is a domestic market or export market, whether it is going for as a specialty product or to the lower segment, urban market or the rural market, but such a huge, populated country like India, or you take the global situations, there are diverse categories of people. So therefore, you can understand what is the requirement, you can meet their requirement accordingly. It is not that everyone need to come up with a specialty or everyone need to come up with the lower segment product. So understand the requirement of the market and the perfect fit between your product and your market. So that is what I mean, that there need to be a good understanding of what we call it as the customer-centric production and marketing. So therefore, what is required today? Every grower need to have some idea about the market. So they need to be given periodic update about or capacity building training on the emerging markets and the market requirement. So therefore, to sum up, based on the first point, you need to shift your focus that your product is not just sufficient or okay to dispatch, but it should be okay to consume. So you as a producer has to take up the responsibility that my product is okay to consume. So this shift has to happen right at the producer level. Now, the second very important aspect to make this marketing more sustainable is the ethical sourcing, right? Now, I have just summed up a few points about the ethical sourcing. One, what they call about is like the assurance to the growers on regular sourcing by the bottle factory. Most of the time, what happens is that during the peak season, like the price crashes, the bottle factory says that my requirement is done today, and literally the grower has to take the produce and travel for a long distance and reach to the another bottle factory. By the time you reach to the other bottle factory, they say that the time is up and I'll reduce the price. If you want to sell it, you sell it. So ultimately, the farmer will have no other go but to dump it. I don't call it as marketing. You dump the product to him and for a throwaway price. Or worst case, they throw the produce on the roadside. So therefore, this system is not going to be sustainable. So there has to be some kind of collaboration between the person who's buying, or I call it as the buyer. Instead of, what you call it as you sourcing, you are buying from him, right? You buy from a small tea grower, and there need to be a assurance that you continue to buy during the peak season also. The next important one is you buy the entire produce. Maybe saying that, I'll take maybe 50% of it. What will happen to the remaining? The producer is again in a deep trouble. The third important one is, am I really giving a fair price or a remunerative price, right? And taking the advantage of the lower bargaining power of the small tea grower. The next one is, am I giving any discriminatory pricing according to the quality of the produce? See, if you look at what is the share of the fine leaf in maybe in 100 gram of, you take a sample and check how many bottle factory are really doing this. So unless and otherwise you discriminate your pricing, or you give or incentivize a grower, somebody who is giving a better produce, this is not going to be sustainable. Because in a global level, if you really wanted to be sustainable, quality is the basic thing that you need to address to. So there has to be some checkpoints at every level. So as a producer or as a buyer, when you are buying the product, fresh leaf from the small tea grower, ensure that you are incentivizing the grower who comes out with a better quality. Finally, very important, transparency in the weighing. So all these aspects that makes what we call it as the concept of what we call it as an ethical sourcing. Ultimately, the larger buyer, you need to have a focus on creating a community. So creating a community among the suppliers, people who are supplying to you. So you create a bond with them. Today there are many organizations, they're already into it, and they create that kind of a database, and they make use this community creation as a marketing tool, as a USP to differentiate their produce. Because you also need to understand in a matured market like tea market, what is required is the product differentiation. And how best you differentiate your product. Because all the time the argument is that the market is becoming saturation, should I really need to expand my produce? But then the answer is like such a conditions, you as a marketer, you need to be very, very innovative in developing a product and differentiating it. One such is that you need to create a community among the suppliers. Right? I have come across some of the bottle factories, even the corporate, they are really practicing this. But this need to happen and the model need to be replicated across the producing region. The third important aspect is about product innovation and the development. Right? I just wanted to share some of the experiences that we gained from other commodities. So for example, cardamom has been marketed through auction system. But today, if you look at certain share of cardamom, the auction happens exclusively for graded cardamom. So that means you're encouraging the producer to do some non-farm activity at its farm level itself. So some kind of an innovation. So the recently you have come out with what you call it as e-auction of lab-tested green cardamom. So you need to create infrastructure at the every producing level so that the producer will come to know about where he stands. What is his produce is all about. Because many a time, the small tea grower doesn't have any appreciation for his produce. Another similar kind of an initiative is taken for, the coffee. In the tribal area of Paderu, in Andhra Pradesh, they come up with what you call it as know your coffee. So infrastructure and the lab has been established in the deeper, the remote area. So the small grower can bring his produce, do the testing and get to know about his produce. The advantage of the exercise can also be thought about for making this tea marketing as more sustainable. Because this kind of an awareness has to come from the grower level. At the bottom level, at the producer level, small tea grower level, they need to have an appreciation for the quality of their produce. Right? Now, the fourth important point is something which is very important, that aligning the branding with the sourcing strategy. So this strategy helps in integrating the farmer into the marketing system. Because as of now, it is once the produce is given to the bottle factory, your job is done. And many a time you as a farmer, you are not even knowing about what is happening in your tea, which market it is going, right? Which segment it is going. So therefore, something which is very important is that the farmer should be made as a part of the marketing. And he should be integrated into the marketing system. So one such is what he called as you're aligning your marketing strategy with your sourcing strategy. Especially like, the big corporate, when you source the raw material from the small tea growers, it's not that, you just forget them. Once it is being processed, their identity is gone. But you need to come out with some kind of a marketing program wherein the producer identity is also been established. The producer's identity is also been, revealed to the buyer, wherever the buyer is, globally. Right? So this, I think, I was working on a project called this branding of green tea leaf for enhancing the competitiveness. Right? So I'm not going to share in detail about how this was being done, but what is the logic behind? If you look at a product, something which is very similar to a tea leaf, which is a very fresh leaf, and which is what you call it as has got a very less shelf life, which is perishable, and you take a product like lettuce. Lettuce as fresh leafy vegetable having very less shelf life is been branded successfully. This is one typical case that talks about even a product that goes for a B2B that gets processing and has got a very shelf life can very well be branded. The second, so it's a B2B, it is also perishable, and how best you can differentiate it and brand it. You think beyond the product, right? So because if you look at, connecting with the market, the technology is helping. One example and this concept we call it as ingredient branding, right? So the concept of ingredient branding therefore can very well be used for marketing of tea leaf. And today there are multiple, different companies, they use the similar concept, especially using the blockchain technology, wherein they try to connect the every stakeholders or all the value chain actors, and whatever the value addition which is happening at various levels, that is being revealed to the final customer. If I wanted to know about in which farm this pineapple has been produced, who is the farmer, how it is being produced, and which lab is given an, testing on that, that test I can download and I can monitor that. So this kind of the technology can very well be used to connect the producer into the market. And to talk about some experience which I gained through this, if you look at the way in which the tea leaf is being transported, is so sad state of affairs, wherein they overload. Just one of the argument which favors is like you save the time and save the cost of distribution. But the problem is by the time it reaches, it's pressed like a hot cake, and by the time it reaches, the quality is lost, right? So there is no proper kind of a standard mechanism for transportation, loading and unloading. Very similar to that, what about the temporary storing? They store it in the open air, not in the inside, or they don't use any plastic crate and using what you call it as in the open loading. So all these are small gray areas where we thought, why didn't you come out with a standard practice even in the transportation to ensure that the quality is there. And finally, what we called as a green marketing. So today, there are many, they make use of this green marketing as a tool to differentiate it. And there is so much of opportunity to connect your, the tea with green marketing, right? Maybe you can talk about the natural farming, organic farming, or eco labels, or recyclable or gradable packaging, or you can also talk about one such which is emerging up is like European Union deforestation regulation. Though it is not applicable for tea, it is very much for rubber, then for coffee, then cocoa, etc. But then always if you certify and that your produce is originated from deforested free land. So all these are the key areas where you can make an attempt to differentiate it, right? So therefore, you also need to be very cautious about you are not entering into something like a greenwashing. Greenwashing is pretending to be that you are taking care of the environment, because today you cannot fool around the market in the long run, right? So therefore, to sum up, if I talk about making this sustainable marketing, number one, ensure that your customer-centric production marketing. Number two, it should be ethical sourcing. Number three is a farmer should be part of the system and you need to be innovative in your practices. Number four, your product development and innovation and the branding, that is aligning your sourcing with your branding strategy. And finally, green marketing. So to give a closer remark, like the story about a small holding farmer. I think today talk about a small tea growers across the Assam region. They all talk about what are the issues, the problems they face about. Whenever we travel across the northeast, they talk about only the problem. But there are people who find an optimistic or the positive in every challenges. So one such, similar to this Idaho, which is in US, known for producing the best quality of the potatoes, right? And everyone has a complaint except one farmer. He says that whenever he harvests his potatoes, he will load it in the truck and he will take the roughest route to reach the local market. So by the time he reaches the local market, all the entire produce gets sorted out, right? So the small one will land up at the bottom, medium size will be in the middle, and the top one raised to the top, right? So he sells the produce according to the graded potatoes and he gets price according to the grading. So he says that when there is a difficulty in life, this difficulty does not make my life bitter but makes my life better, right? So therefore, when the going is tough, tough alone can get going. There is no doubt the sector is undergoing tremendous challenges, but we need to be very robust and resilient. So with this, I stop here. Thank you so much for actively listening to me, and it's open for your questions. Thank you.